Good morning, everyone. It's Friday, May 7th, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kim Mo-kyan. Following Washington's positive remarks toward the temporary lifting of COVID-19 vaccine patents, other world powers, including China, Russia, and the EU, have followed suit. The WTO and WHO have both welcomed the move. Some 200 Korean nationals have returned home from virus-ravaged India this morning. Another 170 of them will return home on Sunday. Meanwhile, South Korea reported 525 new COVID-19 cases Friday. And South Korea posted current account surplus for the 11th month in a row in March, mainly backed by rising exports and international freight. With ongoing efforts to speed up vaccination worldwide, a number of countries are considering whether to issue a waiver to their respective vaccine patents. The decision has been welcomed by the World Trade Organization as well as the World Health Organization. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The head of the World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, has heaped praise on U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai's announcement that Washington supports a temporary lifting on COVID-19 vaccine patents. In a message read by her spokesman, she said she warmly welcomed Washington's willingness to issue a temporary waiver as the world has been slammed by a massive resurgence in cases. The USTR on Wednesday signaled a shift in Washington's position, calling the global health crisis an extraordinary circumstance that requires extraordinary measures. That decision was also welcomed by WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus on Thursday, who called it a historic decision and a bold move. He added that thanks to the decisions made by the U.S., the pandemic will end as quickly as possible. The European Union is also willing to discuss a proposal to waive IP rights for vaccines. According to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Thursday, Brussels is willing to discuss any proposals that address the crisis in an effective and pragmatic manner. Now, other countries that have been developing their own vaccines are also throwing their support behind a temporary patent waiver. On Thursday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said he also supported the idea. According to Putin, the availability of vaccines is not about extracting maximum profit, but about how to ensure safety. China's foreign ministry also hinted at a possible waiver. It said it looked forward to having active and constructive discussions with all parties under the WTO framework in order to reach an effective and equitable agreement. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Pfizer and BioNtech are donating COVID-19 vaccines to athletes competing in the Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games. Delivery is scheduled to begin this month to give enough time for the Olympic delegations to be fully vaccinated before the Games kick off on July 23rd. The IOC described the decision as a way to help make the Games safe and secure for all participants. More than 11,000 athletes are due to take part in the Olympics. The COVID-19 vaccination drive is picking up speed in many countries like Germany, which has seen a twofold increase in its vaccination capacity in just a month. Around a third of Germans have now received their first dose. The U.S. is also speeding up its vaccination with 57% of its adults receiving their first shots. Our Kim Hyo-san reports.
A full-fledged COVID-19 vaccination drive is being carried out across the world, with Germany completing first-dose administration to over 30% of its population as of Thursday. While Germany's vaccine rollout was criticized for its slow start, it has picked up speed dramatically, according to the country's health authorities.
We were able to vaccinate over 15 million people against COVID-19 in Germany in April alone. That's as much as we did in the previous 3 months. So in 1 month, as many as in the 3 months before. And that shows how much more speed we have gained.
Saying the country is stepping closer to normality, the German government plans to ease restrictions for gatherings for those who have been vaccinated or recovered from COVID-19 starting this weekend. More than 10 million people in Turkey have been given both doses, while nearly 25 million have received their first dose. Since the launch of its vaccination program in mid-January, Turkey has been using China's Sinovac and Pfizer's injections, and has recently given emergency approval to Russia's Sputnik V. Norway plans to introduce vaccine certificates early next month, which the government says will grant access to events for such document holders. So far, around a quarter of the country's population have received their first dose, and 6.8% have received 2 doses. In the U.S., some 70% of Americans over 65 have been fully vaccinated. Around 57% of the country's adults have received their first dose. President Biden is aiming for 70% of Americans to get at least one by July 4th. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
South Korea is preparing to roll out COVID-19 vaccines to people aged 60 to 74. Reservations started Thursday for people over 70. They can get their first shots from May 27th. Vaccines are arriving as planned, with the country receiving more than 400,000 Pfizer doses on the same day. Lee Kyung-eun has more.
South Korea on Thursday began accepting reservations for COVID-19 vaccines for the next group of senior citizens. This round will cover people aged 60 to 74 using the AstraZeneca shot. Vaccinations have already started for people over 75 who are getting the Pfizer vaccine. Reservations for this next round will start with the oldest group on May 6, those aged 70 to 74. Those 65 to 69 are next on May 10th, followed by the rest 3 days later. The actual inoculations will start on May 27 for those aged 65 to 74 and from June 6 for those aged 60 to 64. This comes after the government decided to ramp up the vaccination campaign by doing the 60 to 64s earlier than previously planned.
Vaccinating the over 60s is the most effective way to contain transmission among our seniors and to prevent severe disease or death should they be infected.
Data shows that seniors over the age of 65 have the lowest chances of vaccine side effects at less than 0.2%. Anaphylaxis is found to be very rare for all ages, with only 30 cases confirmed since vaccination started in February. With inoculations well underway, vaccine doses arriving in Korea on time with no delays so far. The country received an additional 436,000 doses from Pfizer on Thursday, which adds up to more than 1.1 million doses available for rollout immediately. And by the end of June, Korea is expected to receive some 5 million more Pfizer doses and 7.2 million AstraZeneca doses. Experts say the success of the vaccination campaign now depends on public confidence. And the latest government survey shows around 61% of people said they do intend to get vaccinated. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
And on the COVID-19 situation in South Korea, the nation reported 525 new COVID-19 cases on Friday. Of those cases, 509 were local and 16 were from overseas. There were 9 more deaths, raising the death toll to 1,860. Acting Prime Minister Hong Nam-ki vowed to bring the number of daily new infections below 500 as soon as possible. As of today, a total of more than 3.6 million people have received the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. The 203 South Korean nationals who left India on Thursday arrived home just hours ago as efforts to bring back South Korean nationals from the virus-hit country continue. The passengers were aboard a special Asiana Airlines chartered flight. This is the second of 12 such flights scheduled for this month. Another 170 nationals are set to arrive through a third flight on Sunday. The arriving passengers must head straight to the temporary accommodation and get tested for COVID-19. They should stay there for a week and then get tested for a second time. If they test negative again, they will be able to stay in quarantine for a further week at their homes. They will then have to get tested a third time for their quarantine to be lifted. Latest trade data shows that South Korea in March posted a current account surplus for the 11th month in a row. The Bank of Korea said on Friday that the surplus in March came to around $7.8 billion, up about 32% compared to the same period a year earlier. In the January to March period this year, the country recorded a surplus of nearly $23 billion, up a whopping 76.5% on year. This growth was largely led by exports, which rose in March by more than 18% on year on the back of strong automobile and semiconductor shipments. President Moon Jae-in has laid out an ambitious goal for South Korea to become one of the world's top 5 countries in offshore wind power by 2030. He believes shifting to renewable energy will be a shortcut to carbon neutrality. On Thursday, he was briefed on plans to establish a 6-gigawatt offshore wind power complex near Ulsan as part of the Korean New Deal initiative.
2030년까지 세계 최대 규모의 부유식 해상풍력 단지가 건설될 것입니다. 민관이 함께 총 36조 원을 투자하고 21만 개의 일자리가 만들어질 것입니다. 화석연료 시대의 산업 주도에서 청정 에너지 시대의 산업 주도로 울산은 힘차게 도약할 것입니다.
A floating wind turbine can be installed on seabeds as deep as 60 meters, giving them access to more consistent wind speeds. The president emphasized offshore wind can contribute to achieving the goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2050. South Korea's National Security Council had a positive evaluation of the U.S. policy review on North Korea. The NSC said it was decided in a realistic and practical direction that focuses on diplomacy and close cooperation between Seoul and Washington. Although details are not yet released, the White House claimed to have completed its review and called for a calibrated approach for complete denuclearization of the peninsula. The NSC vowed to step up communication and cooperation with related parties for the swift resumption of talks between Pyongyang and Washington, as well as between the two Koreas. The Council also plans to continue working closely with the states to ensure a successful Seoul-Washington summit scheduled for May 21st. Participants of the G7 ministerial meeting renewed their commitment for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Seoul's foreign minister called for cooperation with COVID-19 vaccines. The Indian foreign minister participated online due to a coronavirus outbreak among his delegation. Kim Ji-yeon brings us the highlights from the session.
The top diplomats of the group of 7 countries have expressed their concerns over the human rights violations in North Korea and urged the North to refrain from provocative actions and to return to talks. They have also called for a strengthening of cooperation to respond to the North's cyber attacks, which fund its weapons programs. The ministers also expressed concerns over some countries not enforcing international sanctions placed on the regime. The joint statement issued at the end of the G7 Foreign and Development Ministers meeting in London on Wednesday reads, "We call on North Korea to refrain from provocative actions and to engage in a diplomatic process with the explicit goal of denuclearization. We remain committed to the goal of complete, verifiable, and irreversible abandonment of all of North Korea's unlawful weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile programs, in accordance with relevant UN Security Council resolution." Notably, the term complete, verifiable, and irreversible abandonment emerged, replacing the initial CVID, in which the last T stands for dismantlement, and interchangeably it also meant denuclearization. The two terms CVIA and CVID mean the same, but CVIA, which was first used in a UN Security Council resolution in 2006, is thought to make North Korea less resistant. The term CVID, first used by the George W. Bush administration, had implied the U.S.'s unwilling attitude towards the issue of denuclearization. Delegations from South Korea, India, Australia, and South Africa attended as guests at the meeting. According to the South Korean Foreign Ministry, Minister Chung Eui-yong had shared the country's COVID-19 quarantine response measures during the meeting and called for the G7 countries' cooperation for fair, equitable access to vaccines. The ministry also said potential agendas for the upcoming G7 summit in June had been discussed, including a collective response against climate change. Indian Foreign Minister Subrahmanyam Jaishankar participated in the ministers' meeting via video link after some members of his delegation were confirmed to have COVID-19 after arriving at the conference site. The delegation team is currently in quarantine. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
An enormous number of people, especially those in their 20s and 30s, are suffering mental health issues as a result of the pandemic. Depression is up in South Korea, especially for the younger age group, and more people are having suicidal thoughts. Our Seo Eun-kyung has this story.
The Ministry of Health and Welfare said on Thursday that the proportion of people at risk of developing depression has increased by over 5 percentage points this March from the same month last year. This is based on a survey conducted from March 29th to April 12th on 2,110 adults. It is the fourth time the survey has been done since the start of COVID-19. Participants were asked how much they felt depression due to the pandemic. Respondents in their 20s and 30s saw the largest increases in depression. Last year, when they were asked how much they feel down due to the pandemic, only around 13% of respondents in their 20s were classified as being at risk of becoming depressed. But by the most recent survey, the figure had jumped to 30%. Those in their 30s saw their risk of depression increase by almost 7 percentage points. The figure for those in their 20s and 30s were around double that of respondents in their 60s, suggesting that young people could be suffering more mental difficulties than older generations. People in their 20s and 30s also were more likely to have suicidal thoughts. Experts say there are psychological reasons behind this.
Since it has been hard to have social gatherings, people, especially the younger generations, have ended up feeling more helpless and depressed. In addition, the COVID-19 period has resulted in a widened wealth gap through stocks and real estate. This could have also led to young people feeling deprived and more depressed.
However, the experts stressed that it is more important to keep in mind that the pandemic will end eventually and that people should use their spare time for self-development through hobbies or reading. Seo Eun-kyung, Arirang News.
Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer convicted of murdering African-American George Floyd, has requested a retrial. His attorney petitioned the court Wednesday, saying he was not given a fair trial as the judge refused to change the venue of the trial. He also said the publicity prior to the trial threatened fairness. Chauvin was convicted on one account of second-degree murder, one account of third-degree murder, and one account of second-degree manslaughter. About a year ago, he had knelt on the neck of George Floyd for more than 9 minutes as Floyd struggled to breathe during an arrest. Chauvin now awaits sentencing, which is expected in the coming weeks. And some developments from the U.S. regarding the private space travel industry. Elon Musk's SpaceX saw a successful test flight of its heavy-lift rocket prototype, while Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin gave details of the company's planned spaceflight with a civilian winner of an auction going along for the ride. Our Kim Do-yeon with the details.
The latest Starship prototype, the SN-15 from Elon Musk's SpaceX, made another successful high-altitude test flight from Texas on Wednesday. But perhaps more important than liftoff, all eyes were on the landing, following 2 fiery explosions at that stage during test flights earlier this year.
And we have ignition, Starship heading back to the landing zone. We are down, the Starship has landed.
The Starship SN-15 is a heavy-lift rocket prototype capable of carrying passengers and 100 tons of cargo on future missions to the Moon and Mars. A safe return to Earth allows the rocket to be used again, making space travel more common and affordable. On the same day, Blue Origin billionaire Jeff Bezos' private rocket company released details of a suborbital sightseeing space trip launching on July 20th. The anniversary of the moon landing 52 years ago, and a milestone in private commercial space travel. 1 seat out of the 6 available to passengers is to be auctioned off.
Now, as you've seen, this is going to be an incredible experience for all of our customers, and certainly for our astronaut winner, the winner of this auction, he or she will write him or herself into the history books, not just of spaceflight, but of history.
Proceeds from the auction will be donated to the company's foundation. Apart from history and the charity, the entertainment angle cannot be ignored.
This capsule, the New Shepard vehicle, has been built with the human spaceflight experience built in from the very beginning. You see those big, gorgeous windows? Those are the largest windows that have ever flown in space. Perfect from which to gaze out, see the beautiful stars and the colors of Earth popping back at you.
These signals indicate commercial space travel for civilians is coming. And in addition to these two companies, Virgin Galactic is currently looking at early 2022 for their first civilian flight. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Good morning. It's another wet, murky start. On and off rain mixed with yellow dust is in the forecast through the late afternoon. And when it does rain, there will be thunder and lightning. Then more yellow dust will be sweeping in after the rain lets up. Air quality will be bad, but it could hit very bad levels at times, while poor air quality lingers through tomorrow. Meanwhile, west of central regions, including Seoul, east of Gangwon-do province, will have storm force winds. It could get difficult to stand without holding on to something. In daily highs in Seoul will be nearly 5 degrees lower today, topping out at 18 degrees Celsius, while southern regions will see highs in the low 20s this afternoon, and there could be glimpses of sunshine during the day. The dust should clear late tomorrow, while sunny conditions are in the forecast for Parents' Day weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that will do it for us at this hour on Arirang News. We'll be back at noon Korea time, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching and goodbye.